From the moment humanity discovered radio, the Galactic Assembly began listening. They expected chaos, and found it. Screaming, laughing, endless debates, music that shifted from sorrowful to defiant in seconds. To most alien species, this was confirmation. Humans were emotional, unstable, and deeply primitive. For over 100 years, Earth was labeled unfit for contact. But even in dismissal, they couldn't stop watching. From deep space listening stations, alien observers studied Earth like a living lab. The species was loud and inefficient. Their politics shifted constantly, their cultures clashed, and their history was steeped in blood. The archives were full of wars, revolutions, and stories of betrayal and ambition. Any logical civilization would have destroyed itself long ago, or so the assembly believed. But humans didn't destroy themselves. They endured. In fact, every time they fell, they rose again. Stronger, smarter, faster. Their greatest inventions came during their worst struggles. Medicine advanced through plague. Technology exploded during war. Even their space program, still young by galactic standards, was born from rivalry and fear. And every time Earth looked like it might collapse, it adapted instead. Some analysts took notice. Deep inside the Assembly's Observation Bureau, a quiet team began compiling reports labeled Human Behavioral Anomalies. They tracked moments where humanity should have fractured. Global disasters, economic collapses, even world wars. Each time, the prediction models failed. Humanity did not follow the standard collapse curve. Instead, they found new ways to survive. One observer, a Xilari named Rethon, watched old footage of a city being devastated by a natural disaster. Instead of panic, he saw strangers running into rubble to pull others out. Instead of retreat, he saw people rebuild with determination in their eyes. Rethon, a species known for logic and precision, stared at the footage in silence for hours. He rewound it over and over, trying to understand. "They thrive in the storm," he finally whispered. But most of the assembly laughed at such notions. Thriving was not the word they'd use. To them, Earth was chaotic by accident, not design. It was a planet that had simply never stabilized, a statistical fluke. Rethon disagreed, but his warnings were buried under bureaucratic noise. Until the Trinaxis was sent. It was meant to be a simple mission, a peaceful first contact. The assembly saw it as a formality, a gesture of goodwill toward a minor species. No one expected resistance. No one expected coordination. They certainly didn't expect what Earth did next. Within hours of the Trinaxis entering orbit, global defense networks locked eyes on it. Satellites tracked its every move. Governments coordinated silently. Across dozens of nations, systems shifted into alert status, not out of fear, but preparation. Earth wasn't panicking. It was preparing. In that moment, for the first time, the assembly stopped laughing, and some began to worry. The Trinaxis slipped into low orbit above Earth under strict protocols. No weapons, no cloaking, no sudden movements. Its hull gleamed silver against the blackness, a diplomatic vessel outfitted for peace. Inside, Ambassador Varel of the Serathi Confederation rehearsed her speech for the 20th time. Translated into over 40 human languages, it was designed to impress, to charm, and above all, to ease the fears of a lesser species. She expected awe, perhaps worship, certainly confusion. What she got instead was silence and strategy. The moment Trinaxis was detected, Earth's sky lit up with signals. Civilian air traffic diverted. Orbital satellites reoriented. Deep-sea communications cables surged with encrypted traffic. Space agencies around the planet independently verified the vessel's presence and moved with astonishing coordination. No single government controlled the response, and yet everything moved in harmony. Viral watched as her ship's scans revealed Earth's military satellites tracking them, quietly, passively. Not one shot was fired, but the message was clear. "We see you." The ambassador's confidence cracked. Within 6 hours, a secure message reached Trinaxis through a redirected satellite relay. It came from a coalition of human leaders, political, scientific, and military. Their tone was calm, direct, and unmistakably measured. The message did not express fear. It offered terms. Terms, not requests. We welcome dialogue, it read. But be advised, we are monitoring your technology, including your propulsion, energy distribution, and onboard AI. We understand this is a diplomatic vessel. We expect it to remain that way. Viral blinked, monitoring their energy systems. The humans shouldn't even understand half of what powered Trinaxis, let alone be able to track it in real time. Something was wrong. Worse still, human scientists had already begun deciphering the ship's hull vibrations, interpreting engine hums, estimating internal layout based on exhaust heat signatures. Within a day, they had working models of Trinaxis' internal systems, propulsion core, and command bridge layout. They were guessing, and they were right. They're not reacting, Varel muttered to her pilot. They're calculating. Back on Earth, news outlets broke the story within hours, but panic never took hold. The public was concerned, yes, but also curious. Enthralled. Some even excited. Cities didn't riot. Nations didn't collapse into chaos. Instead, the world focused. From Tokyo to Nairobi, Buenos Aires to Reykjavik, universities, military analysts, and code breakers came together. Not by government order, but by instinct. Earth responded like a single living organism assessing a potential predator. They didn't ask what they want. They asked, what are they capable of, and how do we stop them if we must? When Varel finally addressed Earth via live transmission, she felt the weight of millions of human eyes watching her, not with fear, but with interest. Tactical interest. The ambassador smiled nervously, unaware that somewhere on Earth, military strategists were already running war games based on her voice pattern, posture, and blink rate. First contact had not gone as planned, and the assembly would soon understand. Earth never did anything by accident. Deep within the Trinaxis, a curious AI historian named Kether activated the data siphon. Earth's digital footprint was massive, chaotic, unfiltered, and layered with misinformation, but that was part of the challenge. Kether specialized in reconstructing timelines from the ashes of lost civilizations. He expected to find tribal origins, rudimentary technology, and eventually the familiar rise of order. Instead, he found fire, and the humans never stopped walking through it. Their ancient texts spoke of kingdoms built and shattered, empires that rose through conquest only to fall to revolution. Kether saw patterns he recognized, but the frequency disturbed him. Where other species had one or two major conflicts over thousands of years, humanity had dozens, hundreds, each more complex than the last. He paused on the footage of two global wars, events so massive that continents were reshaped, ideologies clashed with unimaginable ferocity, and tens of millions died. But what stunned Kether was what came next. Not collapse, not regression. Instead, humanity rebuilt. Faster, smarter. As if the suffering itself had accelerated their growth. What kind of species learned to make nuclear weapons before building a stable global government? He dug deeper through cultural media, films, novels, simulations. Even fiction revealed unsettling truths. They told stories of alien invasions, world-ending catastrophes, and sentient machines turning against them. But humans didn't write these stories to fear them. They wrote them to imagine how they would win. Their art was a playbook. Kether flagged a particular piece of footage, a human child playing a strategy game. She smiled as her civilization was nearly destroyed, then calmly launched a comeback using guerrilla tactics and resource manipulation. She didn't panic. She adapted. He opened another file, this time from a human training facility. Soldiers ran drills in full gear, breathing hard through mud and storm. Their commanders shouted. Their bodies protested. Still, they moved forward, not because they were forced to, but because they had chosen this path. The AI pained Ambassador Varel. They learned through pain, Kether said, voice even, not just endure it, they transform it. Viral frowned. That's what every species does during its early phase. No, Kether replied, adjusting his lens. Most species avoid pain when they can. These humans seek it. They write poems about it, songs, entire philosophies. They treasure the struggle. The ambassador paused. Are you saying it was intentional? Kether hesitated, scanning one final file, a documentary chronicling human progress from stone tools to spaceflight in the span of mere millennia. It ended with a quote, "We are the sum of every trial we survived, and we're not done yet." He turned to her. I'm saying something shaped them. Or, if not something, then the planet itself. Earth didn't give them peace. It gave them a crucible. And humanity stepped inside willingly. In the bioscanning lab aboard Trinaxis, Chief Genetic Analyst Soluan studied the human genome with growing unease. At first, it was simple curiosity. The humans were biologically unique, carbon-based, oxygen-dependent, high-stress tolerance, but none of that was shocking. Dozens of species in the galaxy shared similar traits. But as Soluan mapped the data deeper, he began noticing patterns. Too many, too perfect. Humans possessed an extraordinary range of physical adaptability. They could survive at both poles and in scorching deserts. Their lungs adjusted to low oxygen. Their skin produced melanin in response to sunlight. Their immune systems were battle-hardened, constantly evolving against pathogens. That wasn't unusual for a developing species, but the speed of their evolution was. He pulled up mutation records. Genetic adaptations that should have taken 100,000 years had occurred in just 10, some within one generation. That wasn't evolution. That was forced progression. Soluan ran the DNA through the Assembly's archive of known genetic engineering signatures. Nothing matched. No splicing seams, no modification tags, no artificial protein markers. It looked natural, but it behaved unnatural. He presented the results to Ambassador Varel. There are traits here that serve no purpose in peaceful evolution, he explained. Adrenal surge capacity, far beyond normal mammalian levels. Neurological reaction times that rival predatory species. Muscle regeneration and stress recovery built for combat survival. Viral crossed her arms. You're saying humans are designed for violence? Soluan hesitated. I'm saying they're designed for endurance, for recovery, for resistance. Their biology assumes they will suffer and prepares them not to avoid it, but to overcome it. He displayed a chart comparing human neurochemistry to that of assembly members. In particular, one chemical stood out, dopamine. In humans, this compound spikes not just from pleasure, Soluan said, tapping the chart, but from achievement, especially after effort, after struggle. They are literally rewarded for persistence. Viral frowned. That sounds like psychological conditioning. Exactly, Soluan nodded. But it's built into their biology. Their species doesn't need a culture of perseverance. They're born with it. Another file opened, this time a record of human children who had survived extreme trauma. Many recovered fully. Some became stronger. Others created entire movements or innovations in response to their experiences. Other species break under pressure, Soluan said quietly. Humans bend. Then they come back stronger, as if their entire genetic code was sculpted to prepare them for hardship. Viral's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting someone engineered this? I don't know, Soluan admitted. But if they did, they were either geniuses or monsters. He paused the presentation on a DNA sequence that had no match in any known galactic database, a segment with no known function, yet present in every human. It's like a buried instruction, he said, a dormant code, waiting for something. The ambassador turned away, unsettled. Somewhere on Earth, billions of humans walked, unaware that buried in their cells might be a secret the galaxy wasn't ready for. And the countdown had already begun. On a silent moon orbiting a dead star, buried beneath layers of classified encryption, sat the Assembly's most guarded archive, the Vault of Forbidden Origins. Access was restricted to High Council members only. The last recorded visit had been over 400 cycles ago. But now, Ambassador Virel had authorization. Escorted by two silent sentinels, she stepped into the cold chamber, heart tight with unease. She hadn't asked to come. She had been summoned. The message from High Consul Ishran had been brief. The humans are not an accident. You need to see the files. The vault's AI awakened with a low hum, its voice dry like rusted metal. Query. Earth. Virel answered. Project Primordial. The room dimmed. Then the holograms appeared, ancient, flickering, and fragmented by time. In the earliest days of the galaxy, long before the assembly, there existed a civilization known only as the Founders. Their name was lost, their worlds erased, but fragments of their technology endured far beyond current understanding. They were builders of stars, shapers of life. And they were afraid. According to the recovered logs, the Founders had foreseen a great threat, something vast, consuming, and unrelenting. In response, they initiated the Primordial Directive to create species across the stars that could survive anything. Not just intelligent species, but weapons disguised as civilizations, guardians bred for a war that hadn't yet begun. Most projects failed. Some species collapsed into madness. Others evolved too slowly or lacked the will to resist. But one project remained unaccounted for. Project 13, Earth. A hologram showed a small blue world, unstable and dangerous. The Founders didn't shield it. They amplified its chaos. Ecological disasters, tectonic shifts, volatile climate cycles, all calibrated. Earth was not a haven. It was a forge, and humanity was the metal placed within it. Virel stood frozen. They left it unfinished? She asked quietly. No, the AI replied. They left it, waiting. In one of the final logs, a Founder's voice echoed through the chamber. They must not know what they are. Not yet. They must become, not be made. Only through fire will they be ready. The log ended. Virel stepped back, stunned. We were never watching a primitive species. We were watching a weapon being tempered. She realized then why the assembly had classified the project, not out of malice, but fear. Fear of what would happen when humanity discovered the truth. Fear that the Founders had been right. She left the vault without another word, the silence pressing around her like a shroud. Back aboard the Trinaxis, she gazed down at Earth. So loud, so alive, so unaware. But now she knew humanity wasn't just an anomaly. They were the last hope of a forgotten plan. A species forged not by accident, but by design. And something was coming that would test everything they were meant to be. The world didn't panic. Not after the Trinax's arrival. Not after the press conferences. Not even after the leaked scans of the alien ship flooded every network. Humanity didn't crumble. It unified. The message came 72 hours later. It was transmitted from a deep space array in Australia, coded, layered, and directed at the Trinaxis with surgical precision. No single nation had signed it. No flag was displayed. It was sent in the name of Earth. Ambassador Virel sat in the central chamber, listening alongside her crew as the message played aloud. No threats, no desperation, just words. We acknowledge your presence in orbit. We understand your ship's capabilities and have modeled multiple conflict scenarios. You would win the first strike. You would not win the second. Silence gripped the chamber. The voice was calm, even warm. Human. Male. No accent detectable. An artificially balanced tone, meant to represent no one, and therefore everyone. We are not hostile, but we are not unarmed. We have studied our own extinction for centuries. We have prepared for it in every possible form. Biological, technological, environmental. We have survived every version of ourselves. What makes you think we wouldn't survive you? Virel's grip tightened on the armrest. She knew this wasn't bluffing. Earth's response had not been panicked defense. It was calculated restraint. They weren't escalating. They were warning. The message continued. We have no desire for war, but if it comes, Understand this. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. We endure. That is who we are. You are not the first unknown to challenge our existence. You will not be the last. The last line hit harder than a weapon. We did not ask to be forged in fire, but we will not forget how to burn. The message ended. For a long moment, the crew of Trinaxis said nothing. The translation systems rendered it flawlessly, but the tone needed no interpretation. It was not a threat. It was a promise. A young communications officer, barely into her second cycle of service, turned to Varel. Her voice shook. They sound like they've done this before. Viral didn't answer. She stood and walked to the viewport. Earth hung below, blue and green and alive with light. It looked fragile, peaceful. But now she understood. The silence, the lack of panic, the clarity in their voice. This was not the response of a species overwhelmed by first contact. This was the response of something that had always been waiting for it. Somewhere on the planet, humanity had just decided how this would go. And they weren't going to run. They had been built to survive worse, much worse. And now, the galaxy would have to decide whether to see them as allies or as something far more dangerous. At the edge of the Perseus arm, beyond the reach of assembly charts and ancient star lanes, something stirred. Deep within a fractured moon, sealed in a vault older than most stars, the last warning beacon blinked to life. Its light, pale, rhythmic, encoded, pierced the void. Across the galaxy, dormant relays flickered awake, systems that hadn't activated in over 1 million years. And somewhere in the black, it heard the signal. It had no name. The founders never gave it one. They had only recorded its presence in fragmented equations and dire prophecy. It was not a species. It was not a machine. It was entropy wrapped in cunning, devourer of complexity, undoer of progress. The founders called it the Silence. When it had first arrived, it unmade empires. It did not attack with fleets or fire. It seeded division, broke communication, introduced doubt into systems so perfectly that civilizations collapsed before the Silence even reached them. It erased potential, left planets alive, but empty, minds shattered, unity dissolved. The founders fought it for centuries and lost. Before their final disappearance, they built only one countermeasure, species capable of resisting dissolution, organisms that would not shatter under fear or confusion, beings that learned to survive not because of peace, but in spite of chaos. Humanity was the last and most extreme attempt. The Silence had detected the signal. Earth was now visible. The founders' final experiment had matured, and for the first time in 1 million years, resistance was possible. Back on the Trinaxis, Ambassador Varel received an encrypted priority transmission from the assembly. She opened it with shaking fingers. The Silence has reawakened. The humans are not to be interfered with. They are to be prepared. Prepared? Her heart pounded. That one word changed everything. The assembly knew. The vault had never been buried to hide Earth's origin from humanity. It had been hidden to buy time. And now the clock had run out. She turned to her crew. We need to establish full contact. Immediately. Man, asked the navigator. They already warned us. Viral shook her head. That message wasn't a threat. It was a signal. They're ready to talk. They're ready to lead. On Earth, global governments were already aware. Satellites picked up the same faint ripple, the pulse from the ancient moon. Humanity didn't panic. They activated protocols. Old alliances sparked to life. Cold War bunkers lit up. Deep-sea submarines surfaced to relay hidden data cages. Everything humanity had learned from its long history of fear, struggle, and endurance was now aimed outward. The world didn't brace for war. It sharpened. From the forge of Earth, a blade had been born, one that had never forgotten pain, never forgotten survival. The galaxy was about to remember what the founders had hoped for, and what the Silence had once failed to destroy. They didn't launch a fleet. They launched a message, broadcast across hundreds of frequencies, ancient, modern, and alien. Earth's transmission was loud, clear, and unmistakably human. It carried no anthem, no weapon showcase, no ultimatum, just one phrase. We're ready. Across the galaxy, the assembly trembled. Member species met in emergency councils. Some urged retreat. Others pushed for isolation. But the wisest among them understood this wasn't the beginning of human aggression. It was the beginning of human purpose. In the skies above Earth, the Trinaxis didn't retreat. It opened its gates. Ambassador Varel descended to Earth in full diplomatic regalia, accompanied by her most trusted aides. She expected formality. She expected tension. What she found was something else entirely. They welcomed her not with weapons, but with preparation. Earth's leaders stood united, nations that once teetered on the brink of war now sharing data, training, and insight. Scientists presented models of the silence's likely approach. Soldiers discussed countermeasures not just in combat, but in psychology, information warfare, and resistance to collapse. These weren't people ready to fight for survival. They were preparing to fight for everyone's survival. At a global summit held beneath the reinforced spires of Geneva's Unity Dome, Ambassador Varel stood before humanity's brightest and most hardened minds. She delivered the message that no other species had heard in over 1,000,000 years. The silence is coming, and we are not strong enough to face it alone. There was no applause, no celebration. Only a single nod from Earth's lead coordinator, a woman with war in her eyes and compassion in her voice. Then it's good we're not alone either. That night, across the globe, factories retooled, satellites aligned. Old weapons were melted down, not out of peace, but to build new ones together. For the first time, Earth was not preparing to fight among itself. It was preparing to fight beside others. Humanity wasn't just joining the galactic community. It was leading it. Because Earth understood what the silence could not. Survival isn't strength alone. It's sacrifice. It's unity. It's knowing what you stand for when everything else falls apart. As the galaxy mobilized under this new alliance, stories began to spread of human endurance, of impossible recoveries, of defiance in the face of ruin. What once seemed primitive now looked prophetic. In orbit, the Trinaxis transmitted the message across every star it could reach. The fire still burns. The blade is ready. And far beyond the rim, the silence paused. This time, something was different. The galaxy had found its weapon. Not a superweapon, not an artificial mind, but a species born of trial, sharpened by history, and unafraid of the dark. Humanity had answered the call, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as the shield between everything alive and the void that would swallow it. And somewhere, deep in the stars, the war began.